The MindStudio API is a very powerful way to trigger your AI agents remotely from your own code applications or other products and services. And in this video, I'm going to show you how to use the MindStudio API in order to trigger an agent workflow via n8n. Let's quickly take a look and I'll show you how it works. So the first thing we're going to do is look at our workflow inside of n8n. I have a new client intake form that I've created within n8n, and then I'd like to have some sort of AI processing in between so that we can generate an outreach email for this new prospective client. I then want to add all of the form submission information as well as the new AI generated message into our Google Sheet. So looking at our workflow, I have this sales collateral generator workflow that I built specifically for MindStudio. We are going to need to do a couple of things in order to prepare it for use via API. If we look at the documentation around n8n plus MindStudio, you'll notice that there are a few prerequisites in order to make this integration work. The first is we need a MindStudio account with a published agent. Check, we have that. The second is we'll need to be able to find our agent ID and API key. And lastly, we need to set up our agent to have launch variables in the start block. So let's start with the launch variables. I'm going to jump back into my agent here. And what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to duplicate this workflow. I can right click on it. I'll select duplicate. And then you'll see I have the main one flow. Let me go ahead and right click and I will rename this workflow and we're going to call this API flow. There we go. Now you'll notice that in the original main.flow workflow, we have a user input that is collecting some contextual information. In order to turn this into a workflow that is able to be used via API, we actually are not going to need this user input block, but we are going to need to use those same variables as launch variables in our workflow. So jumping back into the API flow, I will go ahead and delete this user input block, and then I'll start to configure my launch variables. And I can do that by clicking on the start block. And you'll notice at the top right in the configuration panel, we have this section called launch variables. Now you'll want to make sure that your trigger is on demand so that you can create your own custom launch variables. And then we can start to go ahead and add each of our variables in. And we're going to name them the same thing that we named our user inputs. So let's go ahead and add. We have one. The first thing we need is the company underscore name. We're then going to add the rep name. We're going to add the rep title. And then we're going to add the company info. And just like that, we have our launch variables all set up. The next thing we're going to do, just to quickly prep our workflow for use via API, is we're going to change our end block. And our end block is going to be an end session behavior. And we want that because that allows us to create this nice structured output that we can use in our n8n instance. So I'm going to go ahead and create an output here. And this output we're going to call collateral. And for the value, we are actually going to use this generate text block. And instead of displaying to user, we're going to save that to a variable. We're going to call this, collateral. And we'll copy that in. And again, we'll just add the JSON output key collateral, and the value will have the actual variable of the collateral. So now we have our JSON output all set up so that when we get the return value from the API call, we'll actually be able to look for this collateral specifically. So now we have our workflow all set up and ready for use via the MindStudio API. Let's go ahead and I'm going to show you how to find your agent ID and your API key. So first, let's start with the agent ID here. The agent ID is inside of your AI agent, and you can click into the root config folder to open up your agent settings. And under the metadata tab, you'll find this agent ID at the very bottom, and you can copy to click it. We will come back to that a bit later. The next thing we're going to need is our API key. And the API key will be available if we go into the home page, our dashboard. We can open up the developers pages, and then you'll notice API keys here. So we can open up that section. And I've done this demo a couple of times. I'm going to go ahead and delete these old keys. And to add a new key, we can actually click on Create Key here at the top right. Now you will need to name your key, so I'm going to call this key Demo and click Create. It looks like this key already exists, so we're going to call this API Demo, and we will create it. And then from here, we can copy our key, copy the full token. So I have both of these open right now. We have our workflow all set up. Let's jump into n8n and set up the API call. I'm going to open up n8n, and the first thing that we're going to need to do is we'll need to set up a new node. And this node is going to be the HTTP request node. So if I type in HTTP in the search bar, it is the first node on the list. And you'll notice here that I've already tested out my previous step, so I do have some values coming in from the form submission. All we need to do at this point is set up this HTTP request. Now, if we look at the documentation page, there are some cheat codes here that we can use. And if we scroll down, you'll see this paste curl command. So we can simply copy this curl command, and inside of n8n, we can use this import curl button and paste the curl command in here, and then simply import this. And what that's going to do is it's going to set up a lot of this HTTP request for us. You will notice that the URL is set up, the headers are set up, and the body is set up. And we're going to have to add our own customizations to this. So let's go through one by one. The first thing, if we follow along with the documentation, is we're going to need to use our API key and change that out. So here we have bearer your API key. And so what I'm going to do is I'll go back to my API keys. I will copy my key, and then I will simply replace your API key with my own key. As we make our way down into the body section, we want to make sure that specify body is listed out as using JSON. And the reason for that is because we have another code snippet that we can add in here, and we can copy this from the documentation and simply paste it into this area here. Now we can expand this by using this little button here at the bottom right, so that we can get a better view of it. And you'll notice that we have some values that we need to change. You can see that we need our agent ID, and then we need to include all of the launch variables that we added in our workflow, as well as our workflow name. So let's start with the easy one. Remember, our agent ID is here on this metadata page. So I'm going to go ahead and copy the agent ID, and inside of n8n, I will paste that in. Then the other easy one is the workflow name. So I'm called mine API.flow. Okay, now what we need to do is we are going to add in all of our launch variables. So I'm going to go ahead and go back to my workflow here, and we will add in the company name, the rep name, the rep title. We can do this simply by going to our API flow and copying and pasting each of these variables. Now, one thing to note is that we have 4 variables, and so what we're going to do here is we're just going to go to a new line and add 2 more variables in. So you can see here, instead of 2 variables, now I have 4 launch variables. Now I can just go through and copy these in one by one. And now we have all of our launch variables set. The next thing we have to do is determine what the values of those variables are when we run them through the workflow. And luckily, we have this test from our previous step, and we can pull in those values to represent the values of the launch variables from the AI agents workflow. So you can see here we have company name. So instead of value 1, I'm simply going to delete that. And then I can click and drag company name in here. So let's go ahead and do this for the rest of these. We will do the rep name. In this case, we're asking for full name, the role at the company. We'll bring that in. And then the company info is this final question that asks, tell us everything we need to know. And you can see what this whole JSON object looks like here on the right-hand side. So now we are all set up. We've replaced all of the values we need to replace. So let's go ahead and we will test this out. I'm going to go ahead and close this expanded view. We have our JSON all set up. We have our HTTP requests all set up. So let's go ahead and click test step. Now, when we click on test step, it's going to run that AI agent using the values that we provided. And if we go into our AI agent and open up the debugger, we can see that there is a new run that is actively running. And when that is complete, this particular AI agent has a couple of different steps. But when this run is complete, we will get some values back that we can use in our Google Sheets step. So it looks like it just finished running. It created the collateral here. There we go. And in this case, we can go through. We know that this step is now working, and we can see the output of running this API call. And if we scroll down to the very bottom, we should be able to see the final message. You can see here the result, collateral, and we have the value for that collateral. So let's go ahead and we can use that collateral inside of our Google Sheet. So if we go here and scroll down, we will be able to see all of the values to send. I have already connected my Google Sheets account, and I am appending to the particular sheet and the document itself, and I'm mapping each column manually. Now all we need to do is add the values to send in each column. So it's going to have the company name, the rep title, the about, and the generated collaterals here. So let's go ahead and add those values in. You can see all of the inputs coming in from the left. So here we have our API call, the HTTP request. The company name is coming from the form. The rep name is coming from the form. The rep title is coming from the form. About is coming from the form. And then finally, the collateral is coming from the API request. So if we go and scroll all the way down to the bottom of the API request, we can see this collateral here that we created. There we go. So now let's go ahead and we can test this step. And once it is finished executing, we should see some new entries in our Google Sheet here. And you can now see that we have all of the entries in, including the company name, the rep name, the title, about the company, as well as the generated collaterals. In this case, it's an outreach email for this new prospective customer. And just like that, we have successfully used the MindStudio API in order to trigger an AI agent remotely from an n8n instance. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you next time. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you next time.